Many years later, when William first started to visit the Middleton family home in Berkshire, one of the things he most loved about them was that they were normal. They lived in a comfortable, spacious but unremarkable red brick house with no armed policemen at the gate, and no butlers. They could come and go as they pleased without being photographed. They could take the dog for leisurely walks across the fields with no PPOs on their tail, meet locals for a pint or two in the pub at the weekend, or visit friends without the building having to be swept for security risks first. And they clattered about in the kitchen and sat down to chatty, friendly, family meals together. This scenario, taken for granted by most people in Britain, was something William never experienced at home. There were no intimate family meals when he was growing up. The closest he came to it was in the nursery. Diana had also craved the normality of a happy family life, which she had never had either, but she found it, vicariously, with her friends. She and the boys would be folded into other families and became involved in the everyday to and from. Diana would arrive with huge bunches of beautiful flowers and, while entertaining everyone with dirty jokes and tales out of school, she would set to unloading the dishwasher, chopping onions, peeling potatoes, laying the table and doing all the ordinary things she never did at home. They can feel imprisoned in palaces, says one friend about royal life. It's like living in a gilded cage. She is also convinced that this is why William is so determined to keep staff to a minimum in his own household and to cling to normality for as long as he can. Lady Annabel Goldsmith, after whom the eponymous London nightclub is named, has a large Queen Anne house on the edge of Richmond Park, full of barking dogs and on Sundays full of her large, colourful family. Hers was one of several homes into which Diana and the boys folded comfortably and frequently. She had known Diana's parents long ago but didn't meet Diana until 1989. As Annabel wrote in her memoirs, Sunday lunch at Ormley remains an institution. The lunch itself is usually chaotic. There is a huge sideboard in the dining room and all the food from the first course through the main course and the pudding is laid out buffet style and everyone helps themselves. Lunch is eaten so fast that Diana started to time us. Right, she would say, today was an all-time record. 15 minutes. She would ring and ask if I was going to be at home and if she could come and join me. She would land like a butterfly, have lunch and dart off again, sometimes bringing the boys with her, sometimes not. She would drive herself down, dash through the back door often clutching a present, greet the staff who all loved her, try to evade the mass of dogs yapping at her feet and settle down to amuse us. Her repartee became an essential part of these Sunday lunches, interrupted occasionally when she vanished to the kitchen to do the washing up. The two women, despite the difference in their ages, became good friends. As she wrote, although I felt she responded more to my surroundings than to me personally, I think she did regard me as something of a surrogate mother. Diana would say, William's like a caged tiger in London, can he come down? Lady Annabel's youngest son, Ben, was also at Eton and she would sometimes collect the two boys on a Sunday morning and drive them together, with William's PPOs in the car behind trying to keep up. Friendships for Diana were often as inconsistent as everything else in her life. The closest, warmest and most loyal of friends, like employees, could suddenly find they'd been dropped without the slightest inkling of what they had done to deserve it. Phone calls stopped, everything stopped. Some people heard from her again a year or so later, while others never did. Annabel Goldsmith wasn't one of them, so William and Harry weren't suddenly cut off from the friends and welcome they'd come to enjoy at Ormley. It was harsh for them to be suddenly deprived of others. After the separation, Diana had nowhere in the country to take the boys other than to the houses of her friends. Keeping them amused in London, where they were all so instantly recognizable, was more difficult now they were older. Their outings to theme parks, cinemas and burger restaurants were a great way of bringing normality into their lives, but there was a limit to how many they could visit. So while she didn't much like the country herself, she knew how much the boys did. The solution seemed simple. She would ask her brother for a cottage on the Althorpe estate, which he had inherited after their father's death in March 1991. She knew exactly the one she wanted. It was the garden house, far enough from the big house to cause him and his family no nuisance yet safely enough within the grounds to afford her and her children privacy. Diana's relationship with her family was as volatile as with her friends, and Charles, the ninth Earl, turned her down. He had inherited the £85 million estate with 200-odd cottages and farmhouses, but said that he didn't want the media circus that her presence would attract. The real reason only came out in the Burrell trial, of which more later, after her death, when a letter Charles had written to his sister was produced. He had felt hurt, like so many others, that she had cut him out of her life. Friends say she was very upset. The relationship, sadly, was never fully repaired and the boys missed an opportunity to get to know their uncle. Their country home remained Highgrove, where Tiggy would be in charge. Tiggy was miraculously uncomplicated compared to their parents. She had a healthy, jolly hockey sticks approach to most of life's problems and very little sense of self-preservation. Both boys adored her, although the bond is probably closest between her and Harry. She went everywhere with them, on half-term and summer holidays, on skiing holidays, on trips to join the rest of the royal family at Sandringham and Balmoral. She took them to and from school and to and from Kensington Palace. At Highgrove, she helped them load their ponies into trailers and took them to gymkhanas and shows in pony clubs and to polo lessons and to tea with their friends. She took them shopping, rabbit shooting, and drove across the countryside with them after the hunt. They went fishing and climbing and go-karting. She told them jokes and laughed at theirs, watched the same videos and listened to the same music. Tiggy was never a threat to Diana. A child's love for its mother is as strong a bond as can be found on this earth, however good or bad she may be. Tiggy was simply an affectionate, effusive, demonstrative, confident, overgrown tomboy, who put 110% into the job she was paid to do and probably would have done it for nothing. If their father told them to go to bed, they would ignore him or wheedle him round. If Tiggy told them to, they would call her a bossy old bat, but go. But Diana, with her old insecurities, once again felt threatened. She started a rumor that Tiggy and Prince Charles were having an affair, proof of which was an innocent, and very public, kiss on the cheek on the ski slopes. It was hardly surprising since he had known Tiggy's parents for most of her life, and she is the sort of generous, big-hearted girl who gives everyone hugs and kisses. The hate campaign, which involved a series of disturbing messages left on Tiggy's answering machine, culminated at the Lanesborough Hotel in Knightsbridge in 1995. It was the combined staff Christmas lunch party, which the prince and princess continued to attend together even after their divorce. Tiggy had recently been in hospital for a minor operation, and before everyone sat down, Diana allegedly sidled up to her and whispered in her ear, "So sorry about the baby." The implication that she'd had an abortion was unmistakable. Tiggy reeled in shock and disbelief and Michael Fawcett, the prince's valet, took her home, while the party continued in high spirits, ending in a rather drunken crazy foam fight. No one seemed to be enjoying it more than Diana. A letter from Tiggy's lawyers arrived 4 days later, and although she never received the apology she demanded, she let the matter go. Diana continued to obsess about Tiggy, who in her mind had taken over from Camilla and her ex-husband's affections. She appeared to have come up with the fanciful idea that Camilla was just a smokescreen and that the real woman he loved and wanted to marry was the nanny. When she discovered that Tiggy, now only working part-time since the boys were at school for much of the year, had helped Charles with the invitations to William's confirmation, in March 1997, she went through the roof. She threatened not to go to the service herself if that woman was going to be there. What should have been a joyous and spiritually meaningful occasion for Prince William turned out to be another family nightmare. On arrival at Eton, every boy has to sign the school register and state their religious denomination. William was not the first small boy who had to ask his father what denomination he was, although he was the only one who will one day become the church's supreme governor. He had been a regular churchgoer all his life and there were weekly chapel services at Ludgrove, as there were at Eton, but, like most small boys, it was a routine he had never thought too much about. Confirmation was another routine he went into with most of the other Anglicans in his year. They all went to classes with the college chaplain, the Reverend T.D. Mullins, but while they were confirmed in College Chapel, he was confirmed separately at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. Sir Lawrence van der Post had died a few months earlier, but all 5 of William's remaining godparents were there, as were the Queen Mother and both his parents, who, unusually, arrived for the service in one car with the Prince driving, Diana sitting beside him and William and Harry in the back. After the service, the group posed for an official photograph, and Ian Jones, who was attached to the Daily Telegraph and had been photographing the family for nearly 10 years, was invited to take it. He was given 3 minutes, and owes the success of the picture to the Queen. The seating plan was a delicate matter, which he left to the palace, but when he looked through the lens of his camera he realized that the second row was standing too far back. As he wrestled with the protocol of addressing several royal highnesses, a few your majesties and many lords and ladies, the Queen looked behind her and said, come on, all move forward or you'll all be out of focus." Then turning to Ian she said, "You see, I know a thing or two about photography." It had a wonderfully relaxing effect on the whole group, and when Ian was finished, the Queen said, "Is that it?" "That's very good." Snowdon, the professional photographer once married to Princess Margaret, always takes 30 minutes. It was the first time in 4 years that the Wales family had posed together, and it was to be the last. Tiggy was not among the 40 members of the congregation. The Duke of Edinburgh was excusably away on a foreign tour, but another sad and glaring omission was William's grandmother, Frances Shandkid. Diana was going through a phase of not speaking to her mother and had chosen not to invite her. In fact, she was asked to invite 40 people and invited no one. When asked why she was not there, Frances had said, "I'm not the person to ask. You should ask the offices of William's parents. I don't want to talk about it." Instead, she placed a notice in the newsletter of Oban Cathedral. She had recently converted to Roman Catholicism, which read, "For my grandson William on his confirmation day. Love from Granny Frances." But when it came to choosing who to invite to the 4th of June, Eton's equivalent of Speech Day, William asked Tiggy and told his parents that he didn't want them to come. Tiggy arrived with William's friend, William Van Cutsum, bearing a wonderful picnic and plenty of drinks. When it was over, William went home to his mother for half-term, and found her in tears. She was distraught that he wanted Tiggy to be at the 4th of June and not her, and as was her way, swiftly let the media know her feelings. A month later, after the end of the summer term, Diana took William and Harry plus their 2 PPOs, at her request, she no longer had one herself, on holiday to the south of France. She had been invited by Muhammad al-Fayed, the wealthy Egyptian owner of Harrods department store, to spend some time with him and his family in Saint Tropez. William wasn't thrilled to be going back to that part of the world. They had had a disastrous holiday on the French Riviera the previous summer when they had shared a villa with Fergie, the Duchess of York, and his cousins, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie. The paparazzi were everywhere and William spent most of his time hiding indoors. Al-Fayed promised total privacy. He would collect them from Kensington Palace in his private helicopter, take them to his home in Surrey for lunch with his family. Then his private Gulfstream 4 jet would take the entire party to Nice, where they would pick up a private yacht for the last leg of the journey to Saint Tropez. There they would alternate between his sumptuous villa on the coast, which was closely guarded, and his boats, including the newly acquired £14 million yacht, Jonical. On the 3rd day Diana was spotted on board Al-Fayed's 1912 teak schooner by a paparazzo who sold his picture to a Sunday tabloid. For the rest of the holiday the whole town was crawling with photographers. Their principal interest was the burgeoning romance between Diana and Al-Fayed's eldest son, Dodi. Diana was on the rebound. For 2 years she had been having an affair with Hasnat Khan, a Pakistan-born heart surgeon, whom she'd met while visiting a friend at the Royal Brompton Hospital. She spent time with him at his small flat in Chelsea and he became a regular visitor to Kensington Palace. Friends say she was very much in love with him and wanted to marry him. she even contemplated converting to Islam and moving to Pakistan. But he ended it just weeks before she went to France. As he told his father, "If I married her, our marriage would not last for more than a year. We are culturally so different from each other. She is from Venus and I am from Mars. If it ever happened, it would be like a marriage from two different planets." She made a point of introducing him to William, who, like most children of divorced parents, never much enjoyed meeting her lovers. Harry was always more relaxed about it, but William didn't really want to know. According to Diana's friend Rosa Monckton, she told Prince William in particular more than most mothers would have told their children. But she had no choice. She wanted her sons to hear the truth from her, about her life and the people she was seeing, and what they meant to her, rather than read a distorted, exaggerated and frequently untrue version in the tabloid press. That same tabloid press, it must be remembered, to which Diana herself incessantly fed stories, and most of the time, they compliantly ate out of her hand. She was in regular contact with the Daily Mail's good-looking reporter, Richard Kay, ringing him just hours before she died. And she had invited most of the tabloid editors to lunch at KP, where she had been hugely indiscreet. On at least one occasion, William joined them. However, not even Diana was immune to the British delight in bringing down to size the people they have hoisted onto pedestals. When she went back to Saint Tropez on her own with Dodi a couple of weeks later and the two were photographed entwined on his father's yacht, it was too much for the commentators. The sight of a paunchy playboy groping a scantily dressed Diana must appall and humiliate Prince William, wrote the late Linda Lee Potter, doyenne of columnists, in the Daily Mail. As the mother of two young sons, she ought to have more decorum and sense. Princess Diana's press relations are now clearly established, wrote Bernard Ingham, Margaret Thatcher's former press officer, in the Express. Any publicity is good publicity. I'm told she and Dodi are made for each other, both having more brass than brains. And Chris Hutchins, in the Sunday Mirror, wrote, just when Diana began to believe that her current romance with likable playboy Dodi Fayed had wiped out her past liaisons, a new tape recording is doing the rounds of Belgravia dinner parties. And this one is hot, hot, hot. I must remember to take it up with Diana next time we find ourselves on adjacent running machines at our West London gym. Charles, like everyone else at court, was very concerned about Diana's love affair with Dodi. Not because he didn't want her to be happy, but because Muhammad al-Fayed was a controversial figure. Long denied British citizenship, he had tried relentlessly to ingratiate himself with the establishment. What could be a better two-fingered salute to them now than to pair his son off with the former Princess of Wales? Or what better trophy to show off to the world than a photograph of him on his yacht with the Queen's grandsons? He didn't keep his delight under a bushel. William and Harry didn't enjoy their holiday. They hadn't particularly taken to Dodi Fayed, nor cared much for the glitzy lifestyle, and they hated the publicity. William and his mother had a terrible row. Harry got into a spat with Muhammad al-Fayed's youngest son, Omar, and Fayed's heavies had attempted to give their PPOs brown envelopes stuffed with pound notes. The whole trip had been extremely uncomfortable. It was with huge relief that they flew back to England to spend the remainder of the holidays with their father, their grandparents and other members of the royal family. After a lunch for the Queen Mother's 97th birthday at Clarence House, they joined Britannia, a far cry from Jonacle, for her last ever cruise of the Western Isles before being decommissioned. Then it was Balmoral and the Peace of the Highlands and a month doing all the countryside things they loved best. But first they had to endure a couple of photo calls with their father. Sandy Henny, the prince's press secretary, had promised editors that she would give them good pictures of the princes and in return they would not use paparazzi shots. She then had the unenviable task of organizing the photos, one for the daily papers, the other for the Sundays. The first one, William did not want to do it, she recalls. It's not true to say that he didn't like the press after his mother died, he didn't like them before that. The three of them were at a particular cabin on the banks of the River Dee and they were going to walk down along the shore. William had his dog, Widgeon, the sister of Hercules, Tiggy's dog. I said, all you have to do is come down to the shore and walk along. I promise you the press are not going to shout questions. They're too frightened to joke. All you have to do is throw a couple of stones in the river, or whatever. The dog saved the day. William was throwing sticks for him and you could see Harry was egging his brother along. The Prince of Wales is just the master because he's lived with it all his life. But the reluctance is there. A week later we did one for the Sunday papers at some weir. I was racking my brains. So I said to Tiggs, have you got any ideas? And she said, Christ no, let's go out in one of the jeeps with Harry. And he was hanging off the back of the jeep like kids do and he said, I've got a couple of ideas. How about doing this one and this one? I said, not sure that would work, Harry. I've got another idea, so off we go. The third idea was brilliant, it was all Harry's. There was a salmon ladder in the river. Okay Harry, how are you going to make this one work? Well, William and First can run down here, and Tiggy's up there with a fag, and Harry's clambering down and I'm thinking, oh my god, we're about to lose number 2, and he came up and he said, right, that's what we're going to do. And I said, well done, Harry, that's going to work. Now you've got to sell it to your father and your brother and bless this kid's heart. What was he, 11? Coming up 12? He briefed the prince, my boss. I had the radio and we were on the other side of the weir with the press and I said, right, to the police. Get them to get out of the car and walk down and Harry will take it from there. And you could see him directing his father. You couldn't hear because of the noise of the weir. But Harry directed the whole thing and it worked. He was brilliant.